Ryan828 and this is Urban Sound's Couture. It's a free transient shaper plugin which you can use for free without a time limit if you want to use this section here. It does have an upgraded section which is the saturation area, so that part of it, if you want to have access to that, you pay for the plugin. But if you don't and you want a free transient shaper, this is probably the best transient shaper that's for free, I think, at the moment. There's probably a few other ones out there, but this is one of the best ones I've used so far. So anyway, Urban Sounds reached out to me to check out this plugin to show you guys what it sounds like and review it and give you guys my thoughts on it as well. Like I said, the audio description is always down in the description below, so if you want to skip to the audio area where I'm just playing this plugin to see what it sounds like, definitely go to that. Let's go through some of the features though. Quickly, I just want to go through the transient area here. So this dial here is the plus. So you get plus up to about 9.3, I think it is, and then you got 9.3 minus, so that increases or decreases the amount of transient. The way it works here is the speed, so you can have speed which is quite fast, so the transient is quite sharp, or you can have it extended, so it's quite a slower kind of transient there, and it goes up to 300 milliseconds, which is quite good. And if you want to reset it, you just double click. I believe that that works on all of them. Yeah, it does. So if you use this section here, which is the front section of the transient, so that's the front where it first hits, this part here. And then if the back section here is more or less where it kind of sustains, it kind of reduces that quite fast if you're using, you know, more or less on this dial here. So this is very useful if you want to shape the way your kick sounds, or if you want to shorten your kick in the mix without having to use other things, you know, going in there and separately shortening down the kick or increasing the transient on your kick. This is super useful when you want to use it in that regard. I would suggest you try this plugin on your mix and just work it and see how it sounds for your mix. And if you want to get, you know, more punchy drums or snare or whatever it is in your mix, you want to get it more sustained or however you want it to sound, this is definitely something to check out. So the section here, it's flat, so the frequency curvature, this is just a bass amplitude, and or the amount I should say. And it just has different frequency curves. So this is Sybil, so more sibilant kind of frequency there, more of a human kind of sounding kind of EQ curve there, and flat. So that just affects the way that the actual detection is on the Couture plugin, and then obviously adjust the transients here. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like, because that's kind of what matters. Really, it doesn't matter what I'm saying, you guys need to know what it sounds like. So let's go through the plugin. I'll play the beat now. Let's go. Okay, so first off, before I engage the plugin, it already is engaged, but before I do anything with the actual curvature of the transients and stuff, just pay focus to this screen here, because this is where all the transients are being visually shown to you. You can see how much, you know, increase you are on the transient at the start, so the peak of the transient, and then you can see, you know, how much sustain it carries on to as well. This is the input, this is the output. Let's go. One thing I like about this plugin as well is this section here, because I'm using the back of the transient, I'm actually shaping how much of a sustain is on that kick and the snare and all the other instruments that are going through there. So you could hear when I adjusted this sharpened section, it actually made the mix sit neater and there was less going on around the sustain of the actual drums. So now I'm going to use the transient part of it, so the actual, you know, the first part of the kick, so you'll hear the transients increase. Let's go with that. So you can see how much of a gain it actually does when you increase it by 3 times. You would probably want to make up or decrease the gain there by using this output dial here. That is definitely useful to use that if you want to get the correct amounts. Again, you can mix this. This is a wet and dry, so that's the amount. So that's kind of like a parallel kind of thing. Now let's get into the way that the saturation section sounds, because that is super useful. This speed here, I'll just show you that as well, because it'll increase the way that the first part of the kick, so the real sharp transient occurs. So we'll just go real quick at that. So we'll go milliseconds to be 0.1. Let's go. So where I could see that would be useful is if you're looking at getting rid of some of the transient on the first part of the kick. So if you wanted to load this just on your kick instrument, I've got it on the entire group. This section here is basically the transient. So it's basically the same as when you look at the ADSRs. So attack, decay, release, sustain is basically how it works. And the attack section here is the attack. So the first part, I'll just zoom in here a bit so you can kind of see what's happening. The attack is pretty much where this click happens. Anywhere above where the lattice section is, they call that the attack. So it could come up to about here, because this is kind of the lattice part. But the first part of the signal is generally the attack of the signal. It carries on to be longer, and if you're looking at a kick, for example, which is what this sample is, the sustain section is here. So if you're messing with the sustain, generally if you're shortening the sustain, you're going to fade out that like that. If you're messing with the attack, you're going to fade the attack in like that. It wouldn't be as aggressive as that. This is obviously an over excessive I should say, amount that I'm showing you guys, but that's kind of the gist of it. So if I was using, for example, if I just zoom in here and just bring this back up a bit so you can see what's happening. So if I was going to mess with the attack, I generally would do this. I'd fade in the attack setting here individually to mess with the attack of my kick, and that's kind of something you'd see generally like that. So the attack would be quite quiet. It would come up here. It might be a little bit louder up there, and then the sustain would go down like that. But that's not what's happening in this track. What I wanted to do though, so that I have my kick fit more with the mix, is reduce the sustain. So then if you're fading out the kick, it allows the kick to sit more in the mix and not take up this frequency area here when other things are filling it up. That could be the bass, it could be other instruments, whatever it is, it could be a vocal, whatever you want to sit in that area. So your kick hits, it's got this time constant here, and that reduces volume quite quickly. That's pretty much what attack and sustain is. So when you're looking at this plugin here, which is Couture, it allows you to adjust the sharpness of the attack here, to the sustain. If you want to reduce that, it can also reduce that for you. That's by using that back section there. And the speed is obviously how fast it does that. So this is can be up to 0.1 and then up to 300. So that's quite slow. So if you're looking at the time constant across the top of this page, you can see that's the time constant there, and that's how that works. So it works in milliseconds. That's how this plugin works as well. Super useful though, because you're allowed to see exactly what's going on in this meter here. So if you're using it on mix, you can actually see it. I would recommend obviously listening to the mix more than anything, but that's how that works. So it's super useful to have a plugin that can actually do that for you without you having to go in there individually do that to each individual instrument. So I've got a snare. I don't want to have to do that every single time. I've got this hi-hat and all that other stuff in there. So if I'm looking at reducing or increasing the transients on my instruments, be it kick, snare, hi-hat, whatever it be, then I can do that with this plugin just on the group. It allows you to then fiddle around with the way you have space in the mix. Super useful. That's what transient shapers are for. They allow you to have more of a punch or more of a sustain or reducing the transient at the start of the mix. So anyway, so this plugin here, let's get back to the actual saturation part of it, and we'll talk about that. So let me show you what the saturation sounds like without any of this transient shaper stuff going on, and work with that as well. So we'll go through this. This is a bit sound. Let's have a listen to that. We'll activate that. Let's go now. I think that could be really useful if you want to create a different sound in your mix. You can hear how much of a difference it makes, so it changes the way that the sound is, it saturates it. You can create a less drive if you want, more or less. You can use these filters here, so high pass or a low pass filter, and then this mood obviously adjusts where the filters are, and that can be pre or post as well. So that's kind of useful if you want to use a plugin that is super handy for using two things, saturation and also transients. They kind of go hand in hand, and I think that's why they combined these two together, so that you guys have a useful plugin just in one interface and it can be used on your mix. So anyway, that's my review of this plugin here. If you like it, obviously give the thumbs up. If you don't, give the thumbs down, so that I know if I'm doing the right thing by you guys. Secondly, check this plugin out. I'll leave the link in the description below for you, so you can check that out, and you can download that for free and check it out on your mix. And I hope you guys like this. Peace out.